Today I'd like to share with you the top 7 tips to improve your results in Blitz and Bullet, and we're gonna learn from none other but Hikaru Nakamura, who's one of the world's best Blitz players. I took these tips from Nakamura's own videos and articles where he shared how he plays Blitz, as well as my own personal impression, because a couple of years ago when I was less focused on coaching and more active Blitz player, I had a rating of slightly above 3000 and I encountered Nakamura a couple of times, so I have my own impression of how he plays, and I wanted to share those insights with you today. And the first piece of advice is to never give up. Let's take a look at this game where Garry Kasparov was playing white against another Grandmaster, Georgiev. And in this position, Garry Kasparov has a queen and a bishop against a lonely king. As such a simply winning position, but as we can see within a few moves, they reached a stalemate, meaning a draw. And the takeaway from this example is that you gotta be shameless and you gotta play till the very end and take your chances. Another example of that could be this position, which is a blitz game between Aronian playing white against Kryushuk playing black. Certainly in this position white is easily winning, it's actually black to move, but nevertheless white is easily winning because of an extra piece and a couple extra pawns. So in the game Kryushuk was certainly upset about this outcome. He played rook to h2 and actually resigned without waiting for the white's response. He probably figured out that white has rook to g8 checkmate. But here's what's remarkable about this game. At this point, Aronian had less than 1 second on the clock, more specifically 0.3 seconds left on the clock. Therefore, it's very likely that he would either miss the move rook to g8 or would not have enough time to actually execute it. Therefore, once again, be shameless, play till the very end, wait for your opponent to actually checkmate you and try to trouble him all along the way. The second piece of advice is to not assume when pre-moving. For example, if we're going to take a look at this position, here on the right side of the screen you can see the statistics of Blitz games played with this. And in a position like that, after white played pawn d4 on the first move, black responded with pawn d5, it's quite normal for black to expect white's main move pawn c4, and so black may pre-move this move pawn e6 in advance. So while waiting for the white's next move to happen, black can already pre-move this move pawn to e6. But here's the trick. Your opponent is not forced to play c4, of course, and your opponent can surprise you either just because they had something else in mind, or even they can deliberately try to take advantage of your pre-move. For example, here you can see that a number of hustlers played bishop g5, trying to take advantage of your pre-move, and indeed, almost 50,000 people played this completely losing move pawn e6, because after pawn e6 white can just go ahead and win the queen, right, for nothing here. So pawn e6 would be a terrible blunder here, but as surprising as it is, it was played by, roughly speaking, 50,000 people, versus the first most played move knight f6 was played roughly 200,000 people, next 150,000, next 100,000. So you can see that it's quite comparable in terms of number of games played by this. So once again, don't assume when pre-moving, only pre-move when you are 100% sure that it is safe. The next advice is to avoid the mainstream opening theory. Here we can see the statistics of games played by Nakamura playing white. Here in the bottom right corner you can see the number of games played over here and the move itself. So you can see that, for example, one of the highest success rate for him, as well as the second most played move, is actually b3, which is not a mainstream opening at all. And he's having a crazy success rate here. You see over 80% all the time. And by the way, if you don't know how to play this, I've got a video covering that opening, and I actually love playing this as well. Also, let's take this move back, and let's say, even if he goes pawn e4, after, let's say, black responds with pawn c5, he usually goes knight c3, going into the closed Sicilian, even though normally knight f3 is a lot more popular. Now, what's the reason for you to avoid the mainstream opening theory? If you play, let's say, this normal move knight to f3, you get yourself engaged into this theoretical discussion. You always have the risk that your opponent knows some lines here, knows some tricks here, and also your opponent can easily play a number of moves quickly and unthinkingly just because it's an opening theory. Therefore, it's always good to get your opponent off their opening preparation, as well as to eliminate any risk for you to get into their home preparation and get in trouble early in the game. Another example would be, let's just take this move back. Let's say when black responds with pawn to e5, again you can see that Naka prefers playing knight c3 once again, instead of going into the mainstream knight to a3. Also, you can see that he plays the bishop's opening, bishop c4, which I do recommend as well, and I've got videos about this opening as well if you wish to study this. So all in all, you can see that he's trying to deviate from the mainstream opening theory, and it works very well for him. And the tip number 4 is to be a troublemaker. Now we're analyzing a game between some player and Naka playing black. It's a pretty normal equal middle game position. White played here knight to e4, and you may think for a second of how would you play here if you were black. I'm pretty sure that after white goes knight e4, many players would just, let's say, trade the knights, because why not? Seems like it's a good move to play, and after queen takes, black would, let's say, move the other knight to f6. I'm pretty sure a lot of players would play something like this. And while there is nothing terribly wrong with this, it's a perfectly fine move to play, there is one drawback specifically for Blitz. You don't create any real problems for white, and the white's moves here are very simple to play. Now let's revert a little bit. And after knight e4, Naka played instead knight to d5. Instead of simplifying the position, he wants to keep it more complex, and on top of that, most importantly, he wants to create a threat. Because now it's getting harder for white. White has to think a little bit, white cannot respond immediately, and also there is a chance for your opponent to make a wrong choice. For example, Mikhail Tal, one of the former world champs, highlighted that idea a lot. He said that if you create problems for your opponent, they can go wrong. If you don't create problems, they'll play fine moves. So knight d5 attacks the queen. Queen went here to b3. Black played pawn f5, hitting the knight in this case. Knight returned, then knight to c5, hitting the queen once again. You see that he's trying to play aggressively, even though he's ready to even weaken this pawn, for example. But in Blitz, it's less critical, because in Blitz, it's harder for your opponent to execute some long-term strategic plan. So tactical operations are, a lot more important. White played queen a3 and now knight f4, keeping it up with the same ideas, pressuring this pawn on g2 in this case. White played knight e4, maybe wanting to go knight b5, so black decided to stop this. White played queen f3, it doesn't attack anything, so the queen is already defending this one. White just wanted to protect his pawn. Now rook to d5, once again preparing to double the rook and to put pressure along the d file, so he's always seeking opportunities to create problems for white. After c4, rook to d7, knight e2, and here black traded. And again, instead of starting to trade something along the d-file, black played rook d8, and after white defending the rook, once again black refused to just get into this massive trade along the d-file, but he played knight d3 instead. Again, keeping it more complex, keeping it harder for white to figure out what to do. And white immediately blunders the pawn. He plays rook d2, overlooking that black can capture this pawn, and white goes rook d1, overlooking another discovered attack, knight e5, which enables this attack along the d-file, but also hits the queen. And white overlooked that probably because they just probably thought that it's just an exchange, but after knight to f3 they just resigned. You can see how pretty much equal position, like that equal position, turned out into a victory for black just because he refused to play simple moves, but instead tried to complicate matters and to make his opponent's life harder. The next piece of advice is, if you found yourself talking to your mouse, it's time to quit.
Oh, come on, mouse, come on, wake up, you stupid mouse, wake up!
In this case, you can see that Nakamura was obviously upset about perhaps some blunder he made, and it does happen. Occasionally, you realize that you're blundering more often than usual, or you lose in time more frequently, and because you just forgot about the clock. Overall, it's natural for us to have a downtrend, and if you notice that, it's better to take a break or to even continue with playing chess for today and to recharge without waiting for your rating to drop to the very rock bottom. And the tip number 6 is to think in critical positions only, because normally while playing a blitz game, you gotta play your every move within just a few seconds and you gotta keep up with that pace throughout the entire game. But occasionally there are situations where you may invest more time only if you think that you can possibly reach a winning position very soon and you just need to calculate the variation through. For example, let's take a look at this position. It is white to move, and we can see here that white has a number of very tempting options. The queen can either go to h7 or can grab this pawn to f7, and overall it looks like black's king is in big danger and can possibly be checkmated within a few moves. In a situation like that, it does make sense to spend a little more time to calculate variations and to try to find the force in win. Because let's say if white goes queen h7 here, and black goes king f8, then queen h8 check here, capturing the pawn, it all looks certainly good in winning for white. Still after rook to f8, covering this pawn so that white cannot capture it. Black is still in the game. White is definitely having a winning advantage, but it's not over, and there is always a risk that you will lose on time or blunder or something, and black can survive here. Now let's take a couple of moves back here. Instead, if white chosen to take this pawn on f7 here, queen takes, and black goes back. The only check we can give here is queen h5 back, and now if we calculate this line through once again, we can see that it reaches a checkmate position. And therefore, in this case, it would make sense for white to stop for a while and to calculate this line through, securing your victory. But in every other case, make sure that you play your every move within just a few seconds. By the way, I've got another video where I'm sharing with you how you can execute this tactical idea in your game playing white against the French defense. So if you're interested, check this out later. Now we're approaching to the final tip for today. This is the game where Nakamura played white against Bortnik, another strong Blitz player. It was white to move. Now let's talk about this position in general a little bit, and then we'll see what's the best move for you to play here, and even more importantly, of course, the idea, the pattern that you can use in your own games. Now, white is better because he's got two minor pieces against the rook, so white is having a material advantage. In addition to that, white has a couple cool passed pawns on the queen side, which are ready to be moved forward, and all in all, white should be having a winning position here. Of course, black is going to capture this pawn on b7 because it's attacked twice and white cannot save it, but nevertheless, white's position is still good. So what would be the best move for white to play here? Well, normally I guess just pushing the passed pawn forward, something like pawn b5. And if black captures the pawn, you can keep pushing the pawn forward, and white's position looks pretty much winning here. But Nakamura played another move instead here. If we reverted back here, he played queen to d7, which didn't seem like it makes much sense because the pawn is attacked twice and you cannot save it anyway. And after queen takes b7, Naka just traded queens here. So the white's advantage here diminishes a little bit, but here is the great piece of advice. When you're up material or down on time during a Blitz game, simplify the position, trade the pieces off. That eliminates the risk for you to make a blunder. Also, since the position becomes very simple, you can play all the following moves quickly within seconds, and even if you're really down on time, you can still play a decent game of chess and convert your advantage into a win. Versus in a complex middle game position, obviously your risk of losing down on time or blundering something are a lot larger. That's why Nakamura chosen not the best move objectively, but the move that simply simplifies the position, and that's how you can win a lot more games and lose a lot less often while playing Blitz. And here is the puzzle of the day. The strongest move here in this position was actually the move pawn c5. And it's a tricky move because if black recaptures, now it is your task to find the winning move for white here and to write it down in the comments below if you can. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and hitting the bell to keep them coming. As always, all the resources I mentioned, the other videos, will be in the description below the video, as well as you can hit the card to watch an opening video, or you can hit that card to watch the masterclass and bring your chess to the next level. Best of luck.